So, okay, hold on. I'm gonna unmute us. Okay, hi, welcome. My score is 3.5. I'm just gonna spoil you guys all right there. uh, it's been a minute since I've been on this side. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Nom Watch Review, part of Nom Talk Network. On this show, we review the latest film drop or a throwback celebrating a milestone, with the exception of tonight. Okay. While eating and drinking our favorite movie theater snacky snacks and sipping on them drinky drinks. As you can see, unfortunately, your host for the evening is me, Stephanie. But right now I am enjoying hot and sour soup because
Ooh.
I'm not feeling great. I'm going to be completely honest. It's probably exhaustion, but the soup always helps. And then I'm drinking Milky's. Not
Uh,
sponsored by Milky's. So we're going to move on and we're going to introduce our guests for the evening. We've got a big party, you guys. We have Bill, we have Derrick, we have Raven. So y'all introduce yourselves, tell them who you are, what you do, what you snacking on. We'll start with Bill.
I am who I am, and that's all that I am. I'm Bill Waters. You can find me mostly at Nerdbot. And this evening, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Just having a Coke. I went through my entire box of Milk Duds earlier, so we'll just go with the drinks for now.
All right, that's fine. Hello, Derrick. Hi, how are ya?
Hi guys. Yes, you can find me at DRock Comedy. That's DROK Comedy on Instagram and Twitter. You can mostly find me on Nerdbot as well, doing tons of reviews, or you can just find me at the movie theater. I'm probably there, watching something. I do not have popcorn because I finished it all today when I saw Glass Onion. So I'm just sipping on iced coffee, but I put it in a Moscow Mule cup, so it makes me feel better, like I'm drinking something fancy. But it's not. It's literally just iced coffee from a Keurig.
That's nobody needs to know.
Yeah. So it's
Nobody
a
needs to
Moscow
know.
Mule, yes, that I made
Absolutely.
myself.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And then hello, Raven. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing pretty dang good. Tonight I have lemon loaf, and I'm just gonna go with straight water hydration because, oh my goodness, it's been a day. So yeah, water's good.
Water is good for you. And
Yeah.
for anybody who is watching the show live, we do have channel points called Nom Buns. You want to collect them buns so you can redeem them buns for some funds, including hydration, which means regardless of what we're drinking, whether it's coffee, water, juice, alcohol, we're going to have to drink it. So the more you use it, we either get very sloshed or very hydrated. So either way, it's a party. I'm very, very excited. We are talking about the 1988 film Willow. Sorry, my brain just froze for a second.
God,
I almost
1988.
forgot what year it was. Yes, it is a 34-year-old film. And
Stop
we're
doing math.
I know,
about to
right? I
I
know.
I know the one time that my brain's actually working for math. It's not for a good cause. But we are talking about the film because there is a series that is going to be dropping soon on Disney Plus. Bill has already seen a little bit of it because the party here, we're all professionals. Some of us get nice little sneaky peekies. Um, so we're going to start with popcorn ratings. As you can see, we do have popcorn ratings. 1 out of 5, 5 being the goat of all movies, that it deserves all the popcorn in the world. Um, I will start by saying I did give it a 3.5. This has been my first time watching it. I've never seen this film ever, ever, ever before. And so I did watch it from 2022 eyes. Bill and Derrick are very, very, very familiar with this concept.
Yeah,
They have,
yes, we are.
but I'm gonna be honest. I'm actually surprised that I'm not the lowest rating person. So let's dive in. What's your experience with this film, and why did you rate it what you did? Derrick, would you like to start?
Sure. Yeah. So I was saying off air, but I'll say it here. I am so rarely the positive dissenter for movies. I feel like I am typically the one that like rates it the 2.5, but everybody else is 4.5. And so I'm just able to rip apart stuff. This is a weird reversal where I'm the only one that gave it the highest score. And now I got to play defense on this on this show. But it's fine. I rated this movie a 4. I saw it when I was young. And those young nostalgic eyes obviously add some rose-colored glasses. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Willow is a perfect film or that it's not extremely problematic when it comes to just plot and pacing and even some of the editing. Like, it's just, there's a lot of things wrong with the movie, but for me, the movie is just so much damn fun no matter what. And I think that there are performances in this film that kind of override some of its misgivings. And I do think that some of those special effects for how revolutionary they were at the time, I actually feel like some of them hold up pretty well, considering it's 34 years old. Most of those look trash. I mean, look, there's some troll stuff that just that it's some of the worst I've seen in a long time, but there's some really, really solid stuff. So there's a lot of things that I really like about this movie. And I think some of those just outweigh some of its misgivings.
Okay. Next down the line, we have Raven.
Yes. So okay, so I saw it like way back when it first came out when I was very young. So young. I swear to God, so young. And that would have been like, oh my God, this is a 5 because this is the coolest thing I've ever seen at this point. And then like I've moved forward in my life and went back and rewatched them like, oh, some of the blatant sexism and the not taking no for no, and like some of the other stuff, I was like, oh no, this gets real shaky real quick. So, but overall, nostalgia included, I'm gonna give it a good solid 3. It's like, it's one of those things that you do love to go back and watch, but you can now admit, oh yeah, it's deeply flawed.
All right. Okay, and now, Bill.
Yeah, so once upon a time in 1988, that was the year I graduated high school, and we were so excited about this film. Oh my God, it's Lucas, and it's gonna be little Opie is making themselves a fantasy film. And I mean, I remember before the movie came out, I had the movie poster. I still have a 35 millimeter copy of the trailer for the movie, the whole thing. This was going to be it. And then the movie came out. This must have been people who thought that Jar Jar was going to be a cool character. This thing was just, it was so bad. So the problem that hit with it was they were marketing as, this is Lucas's new magnum opus. They weren't saying this is a kid's film, this is a whatever film. It's simply, this is the new big thing. And so older viewers went to watch it, and its problem was it was definitely not that. In the 80s, especially by the later 80s, we'd already had the rise and coming and going of the high fantasy arc. There were some really good fantasy films that came out over the span of the 80s. Some real schlock too, but you had things like Dragon Slayer, you had Conan the Barbarian, you had all these other films. I mean, Krull, Hulk the Slayer, all the Sword and the Sorcerer, all of the myriad of films that had come out, and they had kind of set a certain level of bar, especially for the better ones with the better writing. Then this comes along, and you kind of have the same discordiance that we actually got in the prequels, where you have kind of an adult audience brought in, but rather young adult / elementary school level writing for that sort of an audience. And so that for me, it always kind of butted heads that it wasn't this grand thing. It was very by the numbers. Oh, you have a kid with a prophecy. How original, golly. And so it just never really struck. Sorry, rambling. Cheers. But I'm not bitter.
Not at all, Bill. Not at all.
I was gonna say, I could definitely see how if you grew up in a time when the movie was marketed, I can absolutely see how this would be a major letdown. I was luckily too young to really know the marketing and know what that. So I got to see it with the childlike eyes that it was geared towards, and then I got to see it as, you know, an older teenager in the, you know, early 20s, and still wasn't skewed by the marketing of what it was supposed to be. Right. So those rose-colored glasses never really fell off for me. I could recognize its flaws, but at the same time, like, all the things that I loved as a kid, I could now enjoy as an adult because it does have a lot of adult themes. But I can see where that could put you off for sure.
Oh, see, and I always knew that it was marketed for kids because I was a kid when I watched it. I'm like, yes, this is it. And it was all so base level that I actually understood like most of what was going on, which should tell you right there that this is not a movie that was meant for adults per se. It was much more geared towards kids. Because I mean, like even like Sorsha, who was like this big scary bad guy, that beautiful skull mask, that heavy armor, that wicked blade. I mean, that was terrifying as a kid. And then it pops back and you got a Disney princess underneath, and I'm like, she's so pretty. I want to be her. I'm like, yeah, it was meant for kids.
Look, that I I enjoy everybody's perspective and opinions on this film already, just because it feels like we have the same sort of like feelings about the film. Derrick has a little more nostalgia that claps harder compared to the rest of us. But yeah, I mean, I did try to watch this because, you know, I've practiced. I've had lots and lots of practice. I tried to watch this from the perspective of if I was in the 80s, or like when during that era that the film came out, or when the VHS dropped, you know, like it's obviously not going to be same or similar in regards to like how technology advanced in the 90s and early 2000s, or I'm just going to say, I had to Google this to make sure. The Labyrinth came out before Willow. How the hell did I see this magic and masterpiece of like perfection and then see this one being later and just being like, Lucas Howard Howe? Like, my brain just doesn't understand how it was like, it was filled with like grade A like directors and writers and actors, and it turned into this mushy mush of what the hell's going on.
So wait, are you saying that about Willow, or are you saying that about Labyrinth? Because Labyrinth
no, I'm saying this about
mess.
Willow. I'm saying this about Willow.
All
No,
right.
no. I love Labyrinth.
Oh, yeah.
I
love it with my whole chest, but that is a movie that is a mess and about absolutely nothing. But a David Bowie music video.
I despise Labyrinth.
That's a whole different podcast.
You stole a child and you're trying to romance a 16-year-old as a middle-aged man. Like, no.
Stephanie,
there's nothing that makes
slot it in on the schedule. Just put it in on the schedule somewhere, and we'll come back and hash all this out.
Labyrinth rules. I love Labyrinth and Bowie too. And let's go.
And the bulge. And the bulge. Nothing tops the bulge.
Okay,
I just couldn't.
But tonight we are talking about Willow. So hello,
you
may possibly be a little confused. No, we're not talking about Labyrinth. I just went on a tangent that. Okay, we'll talk about that later. Checking in with the comments, the people in the chat. Cue Ball says, "Evening all. Can't wait to get into this. I'm going to say that it's a 5 out of 5 for nostalgic purposes, but 4 out of 5 because the beginning was slow at first, but it picks up quickly, and Val Kilmer and Warwick Davis carried the film throughout. It's beautifully written and shot. Plus, my favorite peeps, Derrick, Raven, Bill, producer Steph. He is currently snacking on some fishy sticks and drinking some soda pops."
Nice.
That's not what he said in chat. Like he's eating fish sticks and drinking soda. Like, very simple. He did that, but you know,
you have to give it flair.
Yeah, right.
Yes, but as he did mention in regards to the pacing of it all, I would love to hear what y'all thought about the pacing of the movie. Who would like to start? Where does this accent coming from? Okay.
Did somebody claim something?
Are we going Swedish Chef here? In the movie, and the piece in the like
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
That's a great George Lucas impersonation.
It's how he directs all his movies. You guys
Here you go, 50-50 boom.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, more intensity.
Oh my goodness.
But let's talk about the pacing of this film.
Oh, this pacing was like Rush Hour with weird open spots. Like, just you're like, going way too slow and then too fast and too slow. And then you're like, the pacing was a little bit whiplash, to say the least. At least how I felt about it. Like, it took forever to really get started, and then it brushed right past certain aspects of what was supposed to be going on, and then you suddenly slow down again, and you're like, could you find a pace and just keep it, please? And it never did. It never did.
Aw. And Bill?
I'll go along the same lines, really. I mean, it has its pacing. It very much has the feeling of you had different people coming in with ideas for story points to hit along the way, and some gelled in better than others. Because like you have the kind of like the main thread between baby and adventures and some of the points, but then how they kind of shoehorned it together. I mean, in the end, this thing already was kind of hindered by the idea that it's story by Lucas and then written by I had to look it up, Bob Dolman, who of course brought us great individual episodes from like WKRP. So witty repartee is not, and speed is not the main thing, but I mean, it was fine, especially for that first time you watch it. It'd probably be fine. It's on those later viewings that you might like, hey, let's get to the next scene or the next main point and just kind of scooch through some of those.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. It lulls in places a lot. And I think for me, some of the winning performance, like I said, I can't get over how much I just absolutely adore Val Kilmer in this movie. When he finally comes onto the scene, and not just when he's in the cage, because that's the only time you really see him for a large part of the film. I mean, when he comes in the latter half of the movie and is actually a part of the adventure, it feels like a totally different movie. Like, he just elevates so many different things in his performance. I love Val Kilmer so much, and he's so great in this movie. But I do, and I think this is something we see a lot with Lucas films, especially when it's a story by or a producer credit or something that he doesn't have his full arms wrapped around. You always kind of feel that tension that Bill's talking about. He just has a tendency to try to override things and squeeze things in that shouldn't necessarily be there. And then you get somebody else that tries to make up for it. And then you get somebody else that's trying to put them both together, and they don't always necessarily mesh. And I feel like anything that George Lucas has really had his hand on where he's not, prequels aside, things like prequels and stuff like that, that's where you get real messy and you start to kind of demonstrate some of the gaps in his actual storytelling and world building. But when he's fighting against other creatives, it does kind of feel jumbled, and that pacing is just, there's so many good things I think that happen here, but they all start and some of them stop, some of them keep going, some of them don't really have strong payoffs, and it just feels like a large mix of everybody's different fantasy. I think, Raven, you said it, where it feels like, at least to me, it feels like a live action D&D story where everybody is kind of imparting their own imagination of what adventure their whole crew should be going on, and everybody's just arguing with the dungeon master, yeah,
pretty much.
Everybody's fighting against them, and they're like, no, my swordsman's doing this, and they're like, but that's not what's in the book. Stop it.
It's so true. Like, it really does feel like a slightly disjointed D&D group. And you're like, I want this to work. I'm rooting for them so bad. But boy, like, trying to keep the swordsman who actually acts more like a bard, like,
yeah.
Because he's a semi-competent swordsman, but honestly, what he does is bolster the people around him. So I'm like, you're a bard, my dude, especially with the way you're like, hey, I'm like, she's the big bad guy for all you know. What are you doing, man? He's like, I'm going to seduce her to get her on our team. I'm like, this shouldn't work. And it worked. And it worked. Fuck.
I mean, y'all hit it on the nail. I feel like there were some moments in the film where it was just like, what's the point of this, and how can we make this go faster? Like, just how can we make this go faster? Because I'm pretty sure we can go faster. I just want to get to the action. Because in my mind, from, how people used to hype it and were hyping it because of the series dropping, a lot of people made me think that this was kind of like a Lord of the Rings, but like a Harry Potter sort of kind of scenario. So I honestly thought there was going to be a lot more magic. I thought there was going to be a little more romance. I did not expect that kind of romance, but you know, like when
It's
the little
1988. Of course you
When
did.
true. I mean, when the little brownie, I think they call
Yeah.
themselves, when the brownie fell in love with the cat, or was it was a cat? Yeah,
Oh
I was
God.
it was
Is it a cat? I can't remember.
I feel like it
I
was
just remember two things about one. Tiny Kevin Pollak, best Kevin Pollak ever. That's my absolute favorite Kevin Pollak. That's my favorite version of Kevin Pollak. I've met him, but I love him in The Usual Suspects. But this is my favorite performance. But no, I always remember two lines. I love the "I stole the baby." I love that. I don't know why that's so funny. And then when he gets stuck in the beer barrel, and then he's just like beer, and then just dives right back in. I was like, oh, that's the dream. Like even as a kid, I was like, I'm pretty sure that's what adults do. I'm pretty sure.
hopes and dreams for the adults.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree. I think this movie does suffer from being a little too bloated too. I mean, I haven't checked the runtime in forever, but when we start talking about
over 2 hours,
it is over 2 hours. It's 126 minutes. And that's a good 30 minutes too long. Like if you're not making a gigantic fantasy epic that's adapted from something that's already strong with source material like Lord of the Rings, then you shouldn't make Lord of the Rings. Like you just shouldn't. Fantasy doesn't necessarily need that, because you can build the world quickly. You can introduce us to especially a movie like this where everything is relatively surface level. It's all very like, there's a prophecy, you got to save the child. Here's all the people on the adventure, and go, God save the queen. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's the base of the story, and you can do all of that in 90 minutes and get everything across. And this one adds, I don't know, what, 36 minutes of stuff we just don't need at all. So yeah, it's definitely bloated for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, and it was a kids movie. And I mean, most kids movies, your runtime was like maybe 75 minutes to 90 minutes max. So for like 2 hours and 6 minutes, trust me, I'm like, as a child, I remember just like white knuckling. I'm like, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. Oh, my attention span is waning. Oh God, I can do it. Yeah, I need to go outside and run around for a while now. I need to touch grass. Jeez. Like it was a lot. It was a lot.
No,
Like honestly, I think if somebody would go back and like just trim it, just give it a little shave in places, I think you could tighten it up to like a solid 90 minutes, 100 minutes max, and like really have a good tighter movie.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I think you could do it a solid just by
it would benefit tremendously from one or two more passes in the editing room, and just tightening it up a bit. I think it would be a better movie. Like, and I already gave it a high rating, but I'm also not blind. Like I understand when movies have bad things going on, and that's been a complaint even for me this year, where like every movie is 2.5, 3 hours, and it's just like, but why, guys? Like almost every review I've done this year, unless the movie fits within that 90-minute, 100-minute runtime, almost every single one, there have been very few movies that have crossed that 2 hour mark that should absolutely cross the 2 hour mark. Almost all of them can shave 10, 15, 20 minutes off the movie and nothing would be affected. The movie would be literally exactly the same, if not better. So, yeah.
All right. I feel like we're all on the same boat in regards to the pacing of the story. Let's go into the acting, the actors. How do we feel? How did they do? Who was the GOAT? Who was the yikes? Why are you here? How do we feel?
I mean, yes to both of those, all of them.
Well, I think I've already made mine very clear, so I'm gonna let somebody else take the reins on who they liked and didn't.
Raven, you want to chime in?
It wasn't even a matter of who was the best actor. Like it was all overacting. It was all overacting. I mean, it was ham laid on with cheese. Like it was over the top, but it was also like you needed kind of that overacting at times just to kind of help like pull you into the story, because overall, if you paid attention strictly to like what was being said, you'd be like, what? Why? But when they're doing, oh yes, and oh, we've got a wand, and we're doing transformations. Look, we're doing CGI transformations, which was really hard to do back then. It's like, oh my god, you just turned into a goat. You're an ostrich. It's a tiger. Holy crap, it's an old woman. Like, it's like there had to be that, or else you'd just be like, the hell is going on here? There's body horror I don't need to see. Like, what the shit?
Okay. Bill?
I mean, I don't think this movie would really be still being talked about if it wasn't for Kilmer and Whaley as Sorsha, because like she just alluded to, they're clearly having a blast with it. They know they're not doing Shakespeare. They're just going to town with it. And the audience is kind of having fun with them. It's like watching the new Jumanji films with The Rock, right? You're mostly enjoying the film because he's having a blast. So you're on that ride with them. Kilmer in this thing, again, he's not going to get a BAFTA for that, but he's having fun. So that makes it engaging. The rest of the cast, was it Sorsha, or not Sorsha, was it Bev Morda? And the older sorceress as well, and Willow, he's great Ewok, but they were kind of more painful writing, but some of that also goes to the dialogue not having been the best. I mean, George has never been good for writing dialogue ever. And so this is where it's kind of like that's where, like, let's get to the action and something else. Let's go sledding down the mountain. Let's do something else. And this is where we're all kind of like, let's go. And that's when it became fun for me. Yeah. And so to your point, if we trim this thing down to 9 minutes and it's more of those getting for these various character situations going on, it'd be a much more palatable, kind of like a fun little ride.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right too, in the sense that Wally and Kilmer are just, they're proof that even good actors can do a lot of good things with a shitty script. And they're the two that do that. Because it's clear they understand the assignment. They have tremendous chemistry. They are so good together. And even if some of those things are skewed with just the way that 80s kind of views women and just views relationships, I get that. I understand that. And that's something that's baked into a lot of movies from that era and the 90s too. It's taken a while for us to kind of get over that. But, all of that aside, they are absolutely fantastic. And they, once they really start to take over the movie, and it kind of shifts to be a little bit more about them and they're included a little bit more, it really does become very, very fun. And you feel more invested in them, their relationship, and their outcome than you do about anything else. Like Elora, you don't care what happens to the baby. Like, you really only care what happens to Mad Mortigan and Sorsha. Like, everything else doesn't matter. And it's really just their performances. Everybody else is they're about as good as they're written, which isn't that great. But the saviors are absolutely Kilmer and Wally, 100%, and Kevin Pollak.
Don't forget, it's like also mentioned that I only realized not long ago that they got hitched at the end of that year.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and really?
Kilmer and her, I mean, so you're seeing all the chemistry of them deciding that, hey, let's start knocking boots back in the trailer between shoots. And so that's,
it shows.
You got to figure they met during the filming and they married in 88. So
wow.
It hit fast.
Yep. Very, very different story than Dirty Dancing.
Then again, I think the little people honestly don't get nearly enough like flowers and accolades for how well they pulled off a fully functional culture and town. Like, I mean, it's one thing to, like build all the structures and everything like that, but like to have a group of people come together and really feel like community, like I loved that. Like that kind of drew me into like Willow's camp, was the fact that he had this, well thought out community who's like, you could tell that the old wizard like believed in him, but he knew he's like, okay, we gotta send you out to like see the world. You'll figure it out. It's okay. Good. Go. And, like the rest of them, like you could tell that there was tension with the old landlord and that, his wife was so long suffering. She was like, oh, you're You're gonna be a wizard again. Okay.
That's nice, honey.
We have children to feed. I'm gonna go ahead and take out some life insurance. Okay, we're good. It's like, but I loved what they did with it when they did with it. But yeah, I'm like, oh, I'm suddenly like remembering that Finn Razul, who is the old woman who has been turned into so many different animals, and Bavmorda, that was a wizard beatdown before Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
You had two octogenarian women who were competent spellcasters beating the crap out of each other on screen way before Lord of the Rings with, Sauron and Gandalf, doing, old man throwdown. Like, that's okay. That kind of warms my heart a little bit more. I'm like, oh yeah.
Or if you consider this, maybe, since Lord of the Rings did technically come out before, like story-wise, it came out before, maybe it was inspired by, maybe the Willow Lady Showdown was perhaps inspired by, but we never know because I'm not fancy enough to be just talking to this Lucas guy and being like, hey, Georgie, answer the question. What's the riddle behind this?
Don't wait for the translation. Answer the question.
Yeah. I'm not even gonna explain this. Like, give me the answer right now. Thank you.
Yeah, well, and according to sources, I don't know which ones, but just he had this idea for a very long time. Like this, George Lucas, he approached, I believe, Howard, but he had the idea like, I don't know, 10, 11 years earlier. Now that could mean any number of things. Like George Lucas has a lot of ideas and most of them are bad. So it's that doesn't mean a lot, but it has been something that I think he'd been pondered on. And look, Willow is very much rooted in fantasy. So it's almost impossible to separate it from things like Lord of the Rings, Chronicles of Narnia, all these things that kind of predate it, all these big giant epics that we all remember, because that's just kind of the world of fantasy. And I think one of the struggles with Willow is that there's too many of the different aspects that get put into this one, and they don't just focus on the simplicity of just the fantasy story that they're trying to tell. They're trying to tell all of the fantasy stories in one, and it just crumbles. And like we've said, kind of tying it back to acting, without Kilmer and Wally, and I agree with Bill, as much as I love this movie, I totally agree. If they were not in this movie, I do not think Willow would be nearly as remembered or as much of a cult classic as it is. They are truly the reason we still talk about this film today. I think there's some production design stuff that goes on there, and obviously they had a massive breakthrough with like the transformation that you're talking about. Like that was huge, and nobody had done it that well before. So I mean, they're breaking visual barriers, and I think they're, like I said, there's, when you talk about the Little People world, I mean, that whole world is beautifully designed. There's some solid costuming, especially with like the masks, and
amazing diversity.
Yeah,
amazing diversity.
Yeah, so there's some good things going on when we talk about just the overall visual design of the film, and some of the cinematography I think is done really, really well. But none of that would matter if it wasn't for Kilmer and Wally. No one would care.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Oh, hey, Eric. Eric is sending some love in the chat. I believe, because I'm on the IMDb trivia thing, because kind of need my resources on me. Apparently, this was the first featured film to use the morphing process developed by ILM. So that's a fun fact. And so let's talk about the effects and the graphics and the whatnot, because yes, this was the 80s, so I'm not gonna completely poo-poo on it because it was brand new at the time. How did we feel about it? Because I do know, like, when the Beast doggies came out, I was staring at it like, that is way too realistic. There's no way in God's green earth that these little dudes are computer graphics. No way. I found out they were Rottweilers wearing costumes, and that's adorable, and I love it. And I'm going to forever love those dogs. forever,
If
forever.
if there was
They
one
are
thing that
terrifying
Lucas,
creature.
oh yeah, well, if there was one thing that Lucas could do, it was make a great Muppet happen. Like, he knew who to employ to make good Muppets happen, and they had some really good practical effects. I really appreciated their practical effects, and I think it's because they limited where they put the CGI that the movie came out so much better. If they had tried to just do all of the big scary effects like the dogs with, CGI, it would not have held up for very long, and they would have blown a much bigger budget. But like they used a good balance of practical visual effects, special effects, and then save the big punches for where you needed some graphic effects. And I think that was, at least somebody was telling him, no, dude, no, we got a budget we need to sort of stay near, and like, yeah, we got it. And so I think they got their way just a little bit, but yeah, not enough people told him no on quite a few things.
I think for me, the effects were, they were fine. They were good. And I think they chose a good path because they didn't come across at the time as being strikingly impressive, nor did they detract, which was fine. Because we had plenty of things that could have morphed, but they would have had to done all the effects the same way. Because if you think earlier, Seventh Voyage of Sinbad and those sorts of films, you have good transition things there, but now you're talking all go motion, stop motion, claymation sort of effects, where you wouldn't be able to get that whole ostrich to tiger to woman thing. It would have looked very different. So it was fine. It was fine. Granted, the glow on that wand looks a whole heck of a lot like a lightsaber glow, but we'll just kind of pass on from that.
What?
Yeah, I think that I think when they do practical effects, and I think a lot of the sets that they build and filming on location and doing a lot of that stuff, that to me is where the some of the movie really shines, in addition to those performances, because I have vivid memories of those set pieces. They're just, we talk about the mountain scene and like filming that on location, Mount Shasta in the snow, and just the creation of that scene and everything about it, like it feels great. And the little people world that they build, it feels real, it feels lived in, and those kinds of things I really, really appreciate. And again, with like the costume design, I think the costumes are just fantastic. Like, there are some truly, truly fantastic costumes in this movie, they're just done very, very well. And then paired with sparing special effects that are pushing the limits of what they can do, I think that is where a lot of those things come together, and look really great. So big giant bridge troll aside, though, that looks awful. It looked awful then. It looks awful now. That is easily one of the worst effects in the entire film.
But the bridge troll and the costume the guy wore?
No. Not the. I'm sorry, not the bridge trolls. The costumes, yes, those look terrible. But,
the two-headed dragon?
Yes, the two-headed dragon. That's what I mean. Yes.
It gave me solid Clash of the Titans from like the 70s vibes. Like,
yeah.
I gotta give it to them. That is very skilled to do, because I thought it looked like claymation, like stop motion, and that is just insane to me. And evidently, according to press kits and novels, the two-headed dragon was named Eborsisk, which is a reference to Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert.
That's funny. I did not know that.
That actually makes their two thumbs down even better. That's hilarious. I love that. That's great. That's great.
It's like they already knew. Like, I feel like George already knew. George was gonna be like, they're gonna hate this, so let's have some fun with this. Maybe. All right. Yeah. So like this may go very quickly. But I do want to ask. And Bill kind of already knows, so we might need to save him for last. What are you expecting the Willow series to kind of play off? because I know somewhere like I read that it was like either a continuation of one of the books or something. But I don't know. But what are you expecting?
I um I I cautiously optimistically want to return to the world, because I think that there are things that I truly appreciate. So, and the problem is I don't know if they're going to do stuff like this, because most filmmakers now, unless they're working on a smaller budget or whatever, most of them tend to just abandon all of the great things that made the original great, in lieu of trying to give everything that sheen, and that pristine look that just makes everything look fake. Even though you're pushing the limits of digital effects, I felt that way about Rings of Power. It was one of my biggest complaints about it, where nothing looks gritty, nothing looks dirty, even the dirt looks clean. And that kind of stuff. It's called something specific, and I can't remember what it is, but people do that all the time. So my hope to return to the world, I don't care where the story goes. I don't know that there's necessarily a need to have a story, but as long as they're returning to things like the practical effects and the nice, big set pieces and things like that, I think it could be good. However, having talked all of this through and recognizing that my two favorite things, one of them won't be in there and the other one is not the same. She's just not the same woman. We'll leave it at that.
All right. I mean, I'm hoping for practicals as well, like with Mando and like the Star Wars like TV shows. They seem to do a good balance of both. So here's hoping. Raven, what would you expect and hope for?
I'm hoping that they sort of keep like the premise. Like, I want them to keep the worlds of like the Daikini and the little people. I want to see those fleshed out cultures return, but I'm really hoping that they kind of rethink how they have certain characters like interact. Like, please get rid of some of the sexism, like update the scripts and whatnot. But yeah, like I also hope they don't make everything, oh, we're gonna go so much like heavy into the CG. Give me those practical effects. I appreciate a good fantasy story that actually has good practical special effects. Give me good makeup, give me good costumes, make me feel like this world is possible before you take me into the improbable or into the impossible. Like, yeah. Give me a world that feels like, oh yeah, I get where they're coming from. They're level 1, they're just starting out, okay, they're being mentored by the level 20 who's been there, and they're like, I'm gonna retire now, kids, So yeah, like give me a little bit of realism, like take that with big old quotation marks. Yeah. Give me some realism before you take me into the fantastical, because that was honestly kind of like the step that they missed. They tried to go from very humdrum to exceedingly impossible so fast, and I'm just like, bring me into the world, especially since it's going to have some time. Bring me into the world, make me really care about it, give me something to like really bite onto before you go wee off to the wild blue yonder, as it were.
All right. Okay. That's fair as well. Bill, being if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, being the one person that's kind of watched a couple of the new Willow show, is there any how are we feeling?
I think it's definitely helpful. People have never watched the movie. They definitely want to probably watch it just so they have an idea of what's going on, because it does kind of drop in with a general, it doesn't really give you a backgrounder much on what's going on in the world. And so when they start name dropping these people, it kind of helps to kind of get your bearings. And from there, you're kind of be rolling forward. So if you're a fan of some of the other fantasy series that have been running around, what was the one, Nimue, the Arthurian variant, where it was the Lady of the Lake and her whole story that happened about a year or two ago,
Oh,
or The Rain.
Is that what it was called? Lady of the Lake?
It might have been. There also recently there's was it the Sorceress, and then earlier The Rain, things like that. If
Yeah,
you
that's
enjoy
right.
those sorts of series, give this one a try. See what happens.
I didn't like Lady of the Lake, so
Exactly.
oh, not good. I put it on par with Warrior Nun, and I hated Warrior Nun.
I am glad that
Don't even get me started about
I hate
that.
that
I am
show.
glad that where
Oh.
possible they kept the original actors
Okay.
and brought them
Yeah.
all back into play. So
Yeah.
that's nice to see folks back around again. And kind of before we leave the movie of Willow, though, it has to be said that Saoirse, as much as any other particular actress, helped feed into fantasy genre loving fanboys having a thing for redheads. There are others in the genre, however, she was definitely high among them.
Yes,
That's fair.
she was.
Oh yeah. And don't worry, we still have a little bit of time. So I want to know, because we covered a lot, but we didn't cover everything necessarily. Was there anything that you wanted to mention or bring up
About the movie, just overall?
Yeah, just overall, like if there were like scenes that you thought were just absolutely worthless and should have been absolutely cut and thrown in the trash immediately or set on fire. How are we feeling? But before we start, Cue Ball did redeem talk in third person. So Derrick, be Stephanie's guest.
Derrick thinks Q needs to only claim hydrate from now on. Derrick does not like this. Derrick thinks this is way harder than anyone thinks that it actually is.
Stephanie agrees.
Yeah, Derrick doesn't like this claim at all. Again, Derrick thinks that if we were going to cut anything, as much as Derrick loves a good Kevin Pollak, and as much as Derrick enjoys the brownies, and Derrick thinks they're very funny, they do nothing. They are literally there for comedic effect, and that is it. I mean, you can make an argument one way or another for how they fit into the story and whatever, but realistically, if you delete all of them from the movie just entirely, and the fairy godmother, whatever she is, if you literally just delete everything to do with them out of the story, everything happens pretty much exactly the same. Nothing really changes, except the baby goes to a different location. Like, that's it. Like, that's the only thing that changes here. So Derrick thinks that would probably be a big thing that I would cut out. Which again is something that Derrick enjoys, but it doesn't necessarily serve the story. And then I think Derrick thinks if you do that as well, you can cut out pretty much the entire scene that I think Raven is really talking about, which is in the tavern. And Val Kilmer dressing up as a woman, trying not, that whole, everything that happens in the tavern is just, it's a bad scene. Like, it's a bad scene from start to finish. So Derrick thinks, you can cut out all the brownies, you can cut out all the dashiki, all of that stuff. And Derrick thinks you can cut out the whole tavern scene. There's probably a few others that Derrick thinks you could probably get rid of, but I do think that would shave, I don't know, a much needed 15-20 minutes out of the movie, focus it more, and probably have a better film. So it's a hard one for me to let go of, because Derrick thinks beer is what adulting is. So it's
Well,
Derrick is not wrong. Raven agrees. Actually, Raven would cut out the baby. Raven thinks that, honestly, if you took the baby out of the equation, you could still have a much stronger movie. Because honestly, the baby didn't really bring much. Like, ooh, baby, we have to bring the baby. Where did the baby go? Cut the baby out. Go straight for the evil queen. We got to take that down. We have to save the world. Let's rock. Would have made it a tighter movie.
Yeah, I mean, the baby kind of becomes a living MacGuffin as far as like, this is what everyone is at. It's the football everyone's after.
Mhm.
And so that becomes the target point. And, to the same, I mean, Bill would probably actually cut most of the Nelwyn Village stuff out. Because they're cute, but they spend a lot of time kind of going, look how cute the village is with all the stuff and all the little people doing little people things. And, but it always stops. And now we got to do this kind of sightseeing. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's nice that they put that much thought into it. But when you've already got a very kind of over padded film, that would be an area as well. But I do kind of like just get outright rid of Alora Dannon. It probably wouldn't. Overall, the movie would not lose much, other than you have to find some reason why things have to go from spot to spot. But you could use other reasons for that.
Make it a stone, make it a magical stone, and it's literally the same movie. Like it doesn't. It doesn't
need to be a baby. It could be anything.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Stephanie completely agrees, and quote Q agrees with Derrick. How long has it been since we've been doing this? So Stephanie does agree. The tavern scene was not only problematic, it was unnecessary. It did give Kilmer an opportunity to just be absolutely goofy to the most bizarre direction Stephanie could ever imagine for Val Kilmer, but also Val Kilmer is Batman, so there's only so much that I can just think he would never do. But yeah, Stephanie does agree. And we are actually getting to that point where we are going to conclude the stream. But again, I would like everybody to say their piece about Willow, because Stephanie thinks we shouldn't circle back on this one. So Bill or Raven, was there anything that you wanted to mention about Willow as the film?
We can stop this, right? We're good. It's been long enough.
I feel.
Okay,
thank goodness.
I know, like, listening to us do it, you think, oh, I could do that. You can't. It's really, really hard. Like, it's really hard to like form thoughts about what you're trying to say while also it's so hard, guys.
It's like doing calculus while snorting pixie sticks.
Yeah, it's
why? Oh God,
yeah,
why? This hurts.
It's a whole different form of multitasking that you just don't do normally, so you don't have the muscle to do it all the time. Anyways, yeah, it's very hard. That's all I'm saying. Anyways, go for it, Bill.
I think in the end, the film is what we already kind of described for the most part. I still think it's funny. At the end, you've got someone who's clearly an inept wizard who can barely do anything. And what does the one kind of goodly sorceress do? Here, have a spell book. Peace out. And leaves. Like, he's not going to end up blowing his little village into a crater at some point. I mean, why do this? Like, what DM decides to give their first level magic user, here's a 20th level spell book, knock yourself out, because nothing bad could possibly happen.
Yeah.
It's like
as somebody who was very new at D&D and learning all the magic spells as I was very much brand new to it, it's very dangerous to give a level 1 person a list of all the spells that they can do in the future. DMs, if you ever hear this, do not, for the love and for everyone's safety, do not give the new guy the list of spells. Just give it to them as they advance. Moving on.
Your journey will end before you leave camp. Like,
yes. Raven, any last minute thoughts or feelings?
I think, like, I still love this movie, even with all my criticism. I love this movie. But yeah, if they went back and literally just, I'm thinking about it, like, if they just shaved a little bit out of it, you could have a really great adventure movie, like D&D style adventure movie that gave you like all of the action and adventure that you wanted, but in like 90 minutes, and it would make it an even better movie. So I'm like, I would love to see it remastered, maybe trimmed a little bit more, but I can't wait to kind of see what they're going to do with the TV series. And overall, I still love it. The nostalgia is here.
Yeah.
I won't deny it's an adorable movie, though.
Yeah. it's I think for me, I think everybody kind of knows where I stand on it. I rate it really high despite my misgivings. I agree with pretty much every objection that someone has, and I understand why someone would rate it that low. It genuinely makes sense. And the movie is highly problematic. There are a ton of things that can be cut, reshaped, reframed to make it a better film. I totally get that. But for me, this is one of those films where I just will not take off my rose-colored glasses. They're always going to stay on. I'm always going to watch this movie with nostalgia goggles on. And sometimes that's okay. As long as you're not, so blind to those things by having them on that you don't realize that, like, yeah, this is for you, not for everyone else necessarily. And that's fine. So I think that's where I kind of stand on this film. There's a special place in my heart that this film can never be torn out of. And I genuinely love this movie, faults and all.
All right. Well, that is a beautiful ending to this chapter that we call Willow. Thank you all for being a part of our live stream podcast, whatever we want to call it at this point. Before we leave, please tell everyone where they can find you. We will start with Derrick.
Yeah, sure. So you guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram, as long as Twitter's still alive. It's at D-Rock Comedy. It's DROK Comedy. Just check out Nerdbot. There's like a review almost every day. Like I don't know how I'm even still watching movies at this point, but I want to get to 200. That's the goal. I want to get to 200 new films this year. So I'm close. I'm actually pretty close. But yeah, check out nerdbot.com. It's a great website. Tons of stuff on there. Really enjoy working on that. So
yay. And Bill?
You can find me as Bill RW3 most everywhere. Screw Twitter. Beyond that, find me on Nerdbot and posting around the socials.
Bing, bam, boom. All right. And then last but not least, Raven.
Yes, you can find me over on Instagram. I'm just starting up a hive. I'm over on TikTok as well. Just look up Sanguine Threads. You'll find me. I already burned my Twitter to the ground, both accounts, so you cannot find me on there ever again.
nice.
Yeah.
Smart move.
Yeah.
It's the right choice, Raven. It's the right choice.
I saw some of like the really, really bad stuff. I'm like, oh nope, I'm out. Nope, not gonna be there for that wave. No. So yeah. But yeah, come find me. I'm actually slowly rebranding, so we shall see what goes on in the new year. But yeah, like do that creative stuff.
Perfect. And you can find me on Instagram, TikTok. I just got the email that everything on my Twitter has been backed up, so we are not going back on Twitter. And I also have a hive, Steph. I don't remember my username. I just made it literally today. So another shout out to our guests, Bill, Derrick, and Raven, for being on. Super excited, very, very glad that you guys had the time to come and talk Willow with us. And don't forget to follow all of our platforms. Username is Nom Talk Network. Our next stream, I believe, is Tuesday, where we will be talking about the Dark Crystal. So until then, have a great week, have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.